Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from rough and rugged Wyoming. Out here in Jackson, just about to leave. I was at the SALT conference. It's kind of like the counter conference to the Federal Reserve's little annual get together. And there were a lot of wonderful people here. I had a chance to hang out with Senator Lummis, met with Tim Scott. By the way, Senator Scott is an amazing guy, really, really nice, incredibly affable, smart, and just has a strong moral core. He's a man with very high integrity. Saw the governor and all the luminaries in the crypto industry, Caitlin Long and Steve Lupian, some BlackRock people running around doing BlackRock stuff, Circle people, you name it, we saw it. It was the who's who of the crypto space, like a mini Milken or a mini Whiff or something like that. So kudos to the SALT organizers for being able to bring so many people together. Anyway, the point of this video is that according to news reports, it's very likely that the candidate I chose to back, RFK, is going to drop out of the race on Friday and endorse Donald Trump. And there's a natural question that people ask when that happens. Do people fall in line and create a unity government? And even though you hold your nose, maybe you endorse the guy at the top. And I get asked a lot about this. And I was actually recently in an interview with Sin City Crypto. And they asked me, and also other people, for example, when I'm on Gokhstein's show, he's a Trump supporter, asked me about it as well. And says, come on, you got to endorse the Orange Man. And my broader point was that the system is badly damaged, and it's a bipartisan duopoly that operates on the concept of lesser of two evils. It is absolutely extraordinary how much we're willing to excuse in people because we don't want to let the other side win. The Democrats claim to be a party of democracy, that they believe everybody's voice and vote should count. Numerous third-party candidates, RFK included, have been directly by the DNC targeted to prevent them from appearing on the ballot. They took the time to collect the tens of thousands of signatures, hire the lawyers, file the paperwork, and any technicality, any issue, even if it doesn't actually exist, they're going to sue you over it, prevent you from getting on the ballot because of the risk of taking votes away from them. That's not democracy. When one weaponizes the legal system to attack their political opponents, it's not democracy. We've endured 4 years of lawfare against the cryptocurrency industry. And people on Team Blue seem to excuse it and say, well, Trump did some stuff. No, Choke Point 2.0 was a unique phenomena of Biden, as is the SEC going after nearly every American exchange and most of the layer one protocols in some way or another. We do not live in an age of clarity, and when we've asked for it, including legislation that was common sense, bipartisan, and sensible, it was either vetoed or killed in committee because of this current administration. And yet we're told that somehow they're going to be pro-crypto, but apparently the party that believes in democracy, which threatened to remove the sitting president using the 25th Amendment, the party that believes in democracy, which picked their candidate with no votes or democratic process that was allowed, tells us that this candidate's policies, we're just going to have to wait until after she's been elected to know what they are. There's no accountability there, and there's no apology there. It's a crooked and broken thing. And saying, well, we really hate the orange guy, so that's an excuse to vote for that and hold your nose, or somehow this will preserve and protect the institutions and the integrity of the United States of America. What are we protecting exactly? The debates were really important to me because when we had third parties, for the first time ever, we could talk about new things, not which bathroom you use or which particular ethnic group seems to think that they're going to get screwed this election cycle, or poor versus rich and all of this nonsense and noise. By the way, there were people at the DNC bragging about being billionaires as well, including the governor of Illinois. We had Oprah tell us how evil and unfair America is and how systemically racist it is and all the challenges she felt when she's worth $2.7 billion. Only in America could a person like Oprah accumulate that wealth. Didn't happen in Europe, never has, never will. Didn't happen in Asia, never has, never will. Only here. I don't fundamentally believe this nation is unfair and evil and systemically problematic, and everybody judges each other differently based upon the color of their skin. It's a regressive and damaging and horrible philosophy. The Republicans are no better. You know, the Republican Party used to stand for things and care about things. It used to say integrity matters, your word matters, decency matters. It used to say things like, let's have sound money. Let's have things like a humble foreign policy. Let's have things like a limited government. This was best expressed in people like Ron Paul, who I supported back in 2007 and again in 2011 when he ran for president through the Campaign for Liberty as a volunteer and the Audit the Fed initiative. And there was pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty direct. And I fought for that. Just a moment. Sorry, someone is at the door. And we lost that. The Republican Party doesn't do that anymore. It's become a cult of personality around MAGA. And MAGA doesn't really have a core. It doesn't matter what the leader says or does. We just have to accept it and fall in line. And while there's an open mind to new things and new concepts, let's be exceedingly clear here. There is no core outside of loyalty to a single individual. That has always been the credo of Trump. You can't follow a person like this because at the end of the day, you can't trust their motivations. You can't trust how they're going to make decisions. You can't trust they're actually going to lead. You don't feel proud. You feel afraid. And that's a very different concept than where we are at, what we need. I was hopeful for third parties because we could talk about things like the $35 trillion national debt. And what concisely are we going to do about that as a nation? That translates to half of every dollar we collect in income tax being spent on the interest on the debt. Not paying down the debt, just the interest of it. Imagine if you personally lived a life like that, where you spent half of your paycheck paying your credit card interest payments, not even the principal. Imagine that. Imagine how catastrophic and damaging that would be. Could you ever climb out of that hole? And that's where we're at as a nation. And both parties are moving us towards a $50 to $75 trillion national debt within the next 10 years, which will translate to 100% of every dollar we collect in taxation going to the interest on the debt. Apparently, Kamala Harris supports a wealth tax, as well as a tax on unrealized capital gains. And it's excused by saying, well, rich people will pay it, so it's okay. I don't think people fully understand or appreciate what that translates to. What that means is the government will then have a legal right to know every single thing you own. And every single year, have accountants figure out if those things are more or less valuable. And if they're more valuable, despite the fact that you haven't realized any of it, you will be sent a bill. And if you can't pay that bill, you will be forced to liquidate the things that you own. In many cases, are illiquid. And what if you disagree at the government's assessment of the valuation of the paintings on your wall, the real estate you own, the private businesses which have no liquidity? Well, you'll be in tax court for 5 to 10 years. And when the government loses, you don't get the legal fees back. This is so far away from any semblance of liberty and freedom. This is so far away from what we started as Americans. It's wrong. And I don't care if it's for people over $100 million of net wealth. That's how it starts, just like how the income tax started in 1913, where the highest bracket was 7%, and it was only for the millionaires. And we woke up 20 years later with the highest bracket being over 90%. And now each and every one of you has to deal with taxation. That is what these people do. And notice something, not a single discussion about cutting the federal budget. If you cut it by 5% every year, in just 10 years, you could balance the entire federal budget and we'd have a surplus. Apparently, our government says to us there is no reality where we can be 5% more efficient every year. We now have to entertain the idea of taking your assets by the barrel of a gun, whether you realize value or not. But don't worry, it's the millionaires and billionaires, so it'll be okay. Philosophically, this is profoundly wrong. Second, the health of America. I have a picture to show you guys, and I think a picture is really worth 1,000 years. The The reality is our food system is poison. You know it, I know it. So right here is a Heinz tomato ketchup. It's not the only product like this, but 92 grams of sugar in that. Look how much sugar is there. Every single thing, when you guys go to the supermarkets, is laden with high fructose corn syrup, refined sugars, seed oils, all kinds of things. And I eat them, you eat them. When you go out to eat, it's impossible to avoid them. You have to be a health nut to even be able to eat regular food and invest an enormous amount of time. That's why more than half of America is sick, either with a chronic ailment, overweight, a mental illness, or something that disabilitates them, costing our healthcare system $4 trillion a year. Didn't used to be this way, but we let, through malfeasance and corruption, our food supply become poison and our healthcare system become poison. And every single one of you knows somebody or is personally impacted by this. Do we discuss it? Did we allow the one candidate who is talking about these things to be on the debate stage, even though he was polling over 15%? We did with Ross Perot back in 1992, but they changed the rules so that that could never happen again. So instead, we can now argue, Orange Man bad. He's a rapist. Well, they welcomed Bill Clinton up on the stage. It's the party of Epstein, the party of Weinstein. Joe Biden's had deplorable conduct throughout his life. But it doesn't matter when it's on that side. It's only on one side. He's this, he's that, he's a fraud. What about all the insider trading that we've seen? No, corruption only works in one particular direction. Lawfare only works in one particular direction. That's what we should care about. That's the only thing this election should be about. Not the fact that we're all sick. Our money is deteriorating rapidly. Our liberties and freedoms are decaying on a daily basis. There's a war on free speech in this nation. There's a war on free society in this nation. We were all locked down for 2 years in one way or another. We abandoned medical ethics in the United States. The whole doctrine of informed consent was thrown out the window. The informed component, we weren't allowed for medicine that we were being given, forced to take, to be told any of the side effects, because that would be vaccine hesitancy. And in terms of consent, tell me, if someone says you can't travel, go to a restaurant, and you'll lose your job, is that consent? Would you consider that consent for sex or anything else in humanity? But no, apparently, that is the line. Every doctor knows that that was wrong. Informed consent was violated. We just accepted it. We accepted a complete breakdown of the FDA protocols where we used to not vaccinate the control group. We would watch them to see cancer rates, chronic ailments, and other such things. For years, it takes decades for vaccines to be approved. But apparently, the FDA can just, when it wants to, do something in 6 months to 12 months, and the science is just as good, which begs the question then, why do we wait for all the other drugs? Why do we accept that? This is something they said is so safe, we're going to give it to your children. And if you reject that, we'll take them away from you, disenroll them from school, and make you a social pariah. And you should hate your fellow neighbor. 40% of Democrats polled saying there should be financial or potentially even criminal consequences for people who didn't vaccinate their children. We just lived through this. Does that divide us or unite us? Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody on the stage saying, what are we going to do as a nation about this? How do we heal? People are angry. And what makes us most angry is the fact that people don't have any outlets for the anger, because both sides of the issue are ignoring each other. Both sides are saying that not only is the other side wrong, there's so little legitimacy in what they're saying, it's beneath even mentioning, which is an extraordinary thing. How you get out of it is you take a reset and you step back. You elect a neutral person, a neutral arbitrator. Would a divorce be fair if the husband gets to decide all the asset allocations, or the wife? Maybe, just maybe, an independent third party should be involved in that discussion. Yet, this is apparently how we're running a nation. Winner takes all, and weaponize the system to punish and abuse any person who was on the other side of it. It would be extremely easy for me, given my position, my wealth, my name, and the connections I have, to make a video and say, I'm endorsing Donald Trump. It would be extremely easy for me to do that. Call the campaign up, show at some rallies, interview some people, fall in line with a bunch of the Kennedy people. It's a lot harder to tell difficult truths and say integrity does matter, and that the bipartisan system is so thoroughly broken that any consent with the system at this point is problematic. Because here is the other reality the media is not telling you. About half of those eligible to vote in the 2024 election, despite the fact that it's the most important election of our lifetime, which is what we hear every 4 years, aren't going to vote. Imagine that. The majority of America is opting out of even participating, mostly due to a belief that their vote doesn't count and a disgust in the candidates that are available. So why endorse the orange man, and why hold the nose and say we should vote for somebody who didn't earn being on the ballot in any semblance of the world and is a complete rejection of any democratic process, who doesn't even feel that they owe us an agenda or a policy? Rather, it should just say Trump or not Trump on the ballot. That's literally what they're doing. And you'll find out after you vote what you got. Meanwhile, we're going to continue getting sicker. We're going to continue getting in deeper debt. Our liberties are going to continue to decay. The wars are only going to get worse. And as America dims as a superpower, our own government is going to turn on us. And it already is doing so by making people go crazy and hate each other. The only reason why I even talk about politics is because the war on crypto was declared unprovoked, unilaterally on us as an industry. We didn't show up and say, gosh, we don't want to follow any regulations, fuck the system, burn the whole government down. There were certainly some people in the industry who did that, like the Silk Road folks and others. And you know what? The Justice Department dealt with them. Fairly or unfairly, it dealt with them. But everybody was trying to innovate and trying to build a new economy, a $2 trillion economy in less than 15 years. The US government invited itself to the party, told us all we're criminals, told us to do things they knew for a fact were impossible to do. And then, when we didn't do it because it's not possible to do, punished us arbitrarily and capriciously. And when they lost in court, claimed victory and continued to do it. That's why the crypto space is so radically involved. And all we asked for was just stop. That's it. We're not asking for tax breaks, subsidies. Just stop and give us clarity and fair rules. And you know what? As an industry, we came together with the FIA, with Fit 21, dozens of attempts, thousands of meetings to say this is fair and reasonable. You can do your job, we can do our job, and fraud stops. And you know what we're welcomed with? Come in and register, go fuck yourself, and we're going to destroy you. So Trump, being a politician, caught wind of this and realized there's a great political opportunity in creating an alliance with our industry. It'll probably be shortly lived, because when the industry is inconvenient to him, he'll turn on it, as he has done on every single person throughout his entire life that has been inconvenient to him. Just ask General Mattis. Just ask Rex Tillerson. Just ask the thousands of people throughout his life that have touched him and worked with him. So a brief reprieve, perhaps some legislation, maybe they get off our back for a little bit. But let's be clear here. Our industry is not going to stop growing. It's not going to stop getting to new heights. And yes, at some point, it will challenge the legitimacy of all fractional reserve banks and fiat currencies. Because at the end of the day, cryptocurrency creates sound money. And if the US is unwilling or unable to embrace that, what that translates to is eventually a philosophical war, much like the war between the Soviet Union and the United States, where our philosophies were so radically incompatible with each other, the best we could hope for was a Cold War. One side eventually has to give way and accept that the philosophy of the other is going to win. And I would like to live in a world where everyone is treated equally. I'd like to live in a world where everybody has fair consideration. I'd like to live in a world where no matter where you're born, where you come from, you have a chance to rise and succeed. I think you would too. I'd also like to live in a world where we trust our institutions instead of descend into an endless death spiral of conspiracies and anti-intellectualism. I'd like to live in a world where when people say things, you can verify those things real time and quickly, and the verifications you can trust. This is the entire point of rewriting the economic, political, and social systems that we live in. I do not see an earnest attempt from either major political party to engage in this respect. And let me remind you, whoever is elected in 2024 will not just have to deal with cryptocurrency policy. They're going to have to deal with the rise of artificial intelligence. Do you trust them to ensure that we don't hand that to massive multinational trillion-dollar companies? They're going to have to deal with the rise of quantum computing. Do you trust them to do that in a fair and equitable way and not weaponize it against the American people and our enemies? They're going to have to deal with nanotechnologies. All these things are filled with microplastics. I guess all your penises have it now. It's probably one of the contributing causes to the massive plummet of fertility in men. Well, guess what? When nanotechnology comes and graphene comes, it has the potential to be the biggest single environmental contagion we have ever known, and a massive surge of cancers and immune disorders. Who's going to regulate that? Who's going to deal with the consequences of nanotechnology? Do we trust the major party candidates to be wise, engage, and listen? Well, if they could do that, why haven't they done that? What about synthetic biology? The darkest sin of COVID wasn't what they did to us. That will forever be remembered, and there will be a reckoning one day. Even if it takes decades, it will happen. The darkest sin is that we continue as a species to make these things in labs, and they're getting deadlier, more infectious, and there still is no international regulatory regime to stop it. The single most dangerous technology in human history, and the single most exponential, in that a small group of people can create something to influence the lives of billions of people negatively, is not being controlled or even discussed. It's kept behind closed doors. Do we trust this regime or future regimes to have the wisdom to engage and figure out a common sense way, in a balanced way, to balance progress with the risks of the progress? No. And those are just a few of the exponential technologies. And the fact that there's also a greater than 50% chance that China will invade Taiwan before 2030. So during the administration, within the 2 terms of it, looking at potentially a war with China, according to the Pentagon's own math. They feel the most likely outcome is after 2027. So do we trust this administration to deal with the potential consequences of a global conflict of 2 superpowers, basically World War III? That is what is at stake. And we were denied an open primary in the Democrat Party. We were denied a real primary with the Republican Party. We were denied open debates. Third-party candidates were stripped off the ballot. And you're told you can't throw your vote away. By the way, for about 44 of the states, your voice doesn't really matter for this election. I live in Wyoming. 73% voted for Trump last time around. Do you honestly believe if I vote for anybody else, it's going to matter? Change anything? What about if you live in California? What about if you live in Texas? What about if you live in Alabama? What about if you live in Florida or Ohio or New York or Massachusetts? Does your voice matter? Does your vote matter? This is why half or more of Americans don't participate. Does that feel like a democracy to you? Does that feel like you have a say? As we see tonight, Kamala and others go and tell you how important you are and how America believes in democracy, when the vast majority of people have absolutely no voice, and in the handful of states where they do, it's always a little suspicious about what ends up happening there. If Trump loses, he's going to say the election was rigged again, and we're going to deal with all the chaos and foment. If Trump wins, the Democrats are going to go insane, And we're going to deal with 4 years of protests, lockdowns, all kinds of craziness. They'll do everything in their power, every lawsuit, every law, instant impeachment, all kinds of things for 4 years, while all these exponential technologies continue to grow, while we have to regulate crypto, while we have to deal with all the wars, while our debt grows from 35 trillion to 45 trillion to 100 trillion and beyond. That's a reality. If Kamala wins, she's going to get bogged down attempting to put in basically communism in the United States, a complete seize of all of your assets with wealth tax and taxes on unrealized gains, capital controls, price controls on goods. Are we going to allow that to happen? No. So what does that mean? No legislation moves forward. No discussion. That's America from 2024 to 2028. We are paralyzed. Nothing gets done. Everybody hates each other, and we're double angry in 2028. Trump will be too old to run again. Even if he tries, he'll likely be knocked out by an even more radicalized MAGA Republican who's even angrier and more vicious, more charismatic, harder for the media to attack. We call it a red Caesar, going against a weakened president, a terrible economy, and potentially in the middle of a world war. That's why this was a pretty important election. And that's why having a guy like RFK drop out tomorrow because of lawfare and an unfair and rigged system is so incredibly irritating and infuriating. I no longer believe that the United States of America can fix things through elections at the federal level. I think the state has failed at this point. And I think whether you vote for Republicans or Democrats, the United States is no longer led by and for the people, but it's led by a uniparty, which has staged a coup and ended the American democracy. I believe the only way we're ever going to make any change is at the state level. Every state needs to change the way we vote, primaries work, and vote for a constitutional convention. We can pass a contingency law saying it triggers when 2/3 do it, and they can't touch the Bill of Rights. But then have at it with the articles because they need to change. This federal government is not accountable. It does not represent us. It murders anybody that gets in its way. And it has so many tools at its disposal to make anyone who speaks out against it an enemy of the state. It's no better than the very people we tried to defeat in war and with philosophy in decades past. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. If you don't believe me, take a look at some of the interviews about the CIA torture that occurred during the Bush administration and ask yourself who went to jail for putting people afraid of bugs in coffins for 10 days with bugs on their body, or waterboarding people, or handcuffing people naked and throwing cold water on them every hour to deprive them of sleep 11 days straight, resulting in permanent damage. No one. Who went to war for reading who went to jail for reading all your emails, your text messages, for knowing you at a very deep and pervasive level, as Snowden and others have revealed about the American spy state, hasn't even stopped? Who went to prison for the failed wars, the lies about the Iraq invasion, and what's happening now in Europe, in the Middle East? No one. Just keeps going, keeps continuing. The digger you deep, the smellier it gets, and the worse it gets. So elections do matter, but the problem is we're not allowed to have an election. More than 80 million Americans are likely going to pull a lever for a candidate that just a year ago had a 23% approval rating, and the vast majority of them couldn't even pronounce her name correctly or know anything about her background or policy or experience. And likely more than 80 million Americans will pull the lever for a 77-year-old former president who is a deeply flawed person and incapable of dealing with the complexity of the U.S. government or amassing the talent required to do so, given his background and his history and his personality. And then one side will win, the other side will claim fraud, unfairness, and the side that wins will attempt to rob us all and then blame the other side when they make failures. It's not going to work anymore, guys, and that's why half of America has opted out. That's why I'm opting out. I will never vote for a Republican or a Democrat again. I'm only going to vote for independents. I'm going to spend the remainder of my life as a U.S. citizen, long or short, who knows these days. People seem to get shot, focusing on changing the federal government through a constitutional convention, changing the way the elections work, changing the way we handle the bureaucracy of America, and forcing honesty and credibility back to the government. I understand that you have strong feelings, and yes, crypto is absolutely on the ballot. And I'm not naive enough to believe that they're exactly the same. As I've said before, Trump will be much more pro-crypto than Kamala Harris. But some things matter a little bit more. And I tried to find a great compromise with RFK where we could get pro-crypto policy and somebody who thought different about the world. I'm not going to hold my nose and endorse a guy that I just don't believe in and I don't think is up for the job and can do the job. It will lead us to a darker place. So we just have to turtle up and accept the fact the person at the top is not going to be able to lead us and that the American government will continue its death spiral. So I invite each and every one of you to get actively involved in the politics of your states, your state legislatures, your state laws, and focus on a constitutional convention. We're showing the world how to do this with Cardano. We're writing one ourselves. We brought people from 50 plus countries together. Come December, we're going to write a constitution. The American people can do it too. And we have 340 million people, and we have so many incredible, bright, amazing people. There's a lot we have to fix along the way. We're going to have to fix our media. The incentives are horrifically broken. We have to fix how we communicate and trust each other because we don't anymore. And we have so thoroughly indulged the politics of personal destruction that we no longer care about policy. We no longer care about philosophy. We care about how a person looks and sounds, and we care about what people say about that person more than we care about what they are saying and its impact on our lives. We have to grow beyond that, or else we don't deserve to be a superpower. And we have to accept that the problems that are coming quickly, and they're coming in legion. In parallel, we have to deal with the rise of exponential technologies, the excesses of the past, and a danger great powers diplomacy that could lead to a global conflict larger than World War II. We have to navigate all of that. Let us navigate it in a way where we pick the best people and give them the best system to solve it. And if we can't do that, why do we complain then? Honestly, I see so many people over Twitter so radicalized and propagandized and saying this, that, and the other. And no matter what I say, they get angry about it. But honestly speaking, do you honestly believe that this is going to somehow magically be better, make a difference? Deep down inside, you know as well as I do, it's not going to. It really isn't. And we've reached a critical point where they can't even lie to us well anymore. They used to be able to sweep it all under the rug, and we all lived in a kayfabe, a fiction, like wrestling with the Hulk and Jake the Snake and Macho Man Randy Savage, and we watched it on TV and pretended like it's real, even though deep down inside we knew it's not. But now we're just getting the script ahead of time. We're just being straight up told before it even happens what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. The crocodile tears of the people there, because the internet gives that to us. I shouldn't know that RFK is going to endorse Trump tomorrow. We shouldn't have known that Biden was going to step away from the election before he announced it and did it. But now, real time, we get the inside baseball 24/7 by this media. And it goes from he's incredibly brilliant and talented and absolutely qualified to be president of the United States, even though everybody could see with their own eyes that he has dementia, to we have to get rid of him. He can only work 4 hours a day. Dementia doctors are coming to the White House every single month. It's just like the Soviet Union, where there's the truth and the truth of what really happened, which is dangerous to know and even more dangerous to say, and the truth that the media tells you that you have to say and believe. Otherwise, there are consequences. So everybody was just waiting. This week, what are we going to say about Kamala? This week, what are we going to say about Trump? This week, what are we going to say about Biden? This week, what are we going to say about RFK? Do you feel like you live in a democracy? Do you feel like that's America? Do you feel like that you have control? It's the Bane scene, the Dark Knight Rises. Do you feel in charge? And should we be so cynical and fatalistic to say that we should just shut up, get in the corner, and accept our fate? This is a country that went to war with the most powerful country in the world over a tea tax, and we won. Even though we didn't have shoes and we had to live in brutal winters and terrible conditions, and we figured out how to build a nation from the ashes of that. We don't fucking sit down and shut up and say we're done. We'll just accept what they give us. We fight. And the fight is no longer at the ballot box at the federal level. The fight's got to be at the state level. That's as far as I've gotten. So after we're done with all this Cardano stuff and we have the full on-chain government and I have some more time, I'm definitely in 2025 going to start an organization. It's going to go state by state, work with other organizations that are looking into this and learn from the Cardano Constitution. And just like the island hopping in World War II, we're going to go state by state and get them to sign up for a new constitutional convention. We'll outline all the problems of the U.S. government. We'll outline all the corruption, the bad things that we've seen where people are excluded. And we're going to rewrite the articles. And then we'll form a new government. And then that new government, we can vote for real people. And we'll have a real voice. Every single American will be included. We'll actually have not just third parties, but multiple parties. We'll have different ballot architectures, quadratic voting, preference voting, in addition to this insanity of plurality. We'll get money out of politics, and we'll acknowledge that there exist super intelligent super actors, they're called corporations, and make accommodations for them in the political process so they don't form a shadow government behind our back. It'll take time. We will be attacked. The media will say we're insane people and laugh at us. And as we start making progress, demonize and say we're evil, horrible people and supremacist this and sexist this and racist that, because that's all they have left is the politics of personal destruction. They don't have the argument or the philosophy anymore because not a single American is happy anymore. Not a single American can say that the system is just. And I lost the last lifeline I had. If RFK is going to drop out, there's no one left for me to vote for. And there's no reason to endorse Trump or Biden or Harris or anyone in between, because we're just going to get more of the same. And this election will not result in a positive outcome from America, regardless of who wins. We're just going to continue the death spiral. And I'm just not going to participate anymore. I'm not going to consent anymore. And I know the majority of Americans believe what I'm saying as well. So you just have to convince them that they actually do have power and we actually can take things back. And it's very encouraging that we brought millions of people together with Cardano, and we did that for an on-chain government, and we learned a lot in the process. It's going to be a long road, a lot of challenges, but I'm up for it, you're up for it, and we're going to get it done. It's the challenge of our time. But we are the original rebels, and we never give up. And as a final point, I'd like to get back to working with people and loving people again. I'd like to get back to liking people. I like to get back at looking at the best in people and admiring people. I watched the debate between JFK and Richard Nixon in 1960. And it's very different from what we're going to see in the Trump-Kamala debate, even if we get there. Even though they had political and policy differences, there was a tremendous amount of respect shown in that debate. It's still on YouTube if you want to watch it. And there were two great people with long and distinguished backgrounds who served their nation and tried their earnest to be good presidents. They were flawed people. They had all kinds of interpersonal issues. For Kennedy, it was sex addiction. Nixon had an inferiority complex. And unfortunately, the pressures of the office exacerbated those issues. and political enemies would take advantage of such things. But deep down inside, they cared about us. And deep down inside, they actually wanted America to be a successful nation. And in their minds, thought they were doing the right thing. I'd like to get back to a world where we talk like that, where we try to find a way to work together, even if we disagree with people. Yes, of course, I jab Solana at times and Ethereum at times and Vitalik at times. But you know what? Do you honestly believe if somebody from that side of the aisle called me tomorrow and said, let's work together on something, I'd say no? Al Grant poached our director of engineering. He's now the CTO over at Al Grant Foundation. That same person called me and said, let's join a mutual effort on wallets. And I said, that sounds great because it benefits us all. Gavin Wood was part of the group of people that pushed me out of Ethereum. We're now using part of parity substrate with Midnight. The problems of yesterday are just that, the problems of yesterday. You can turn a page, wake up tomorrow, and recognize for the greater good or for the benefit of so many people that working with other people matters and helps people. And that's what I do. That's what you do every single day in your life, big and small. Maybe you don't like your neighbor, but there are some days you have to work with them. Maybe there's a coworker that drives you nuts, but you'll drive them to work from time to time just because it's the right thing to do. That's what makes nations great, societies great, organizations great, and people great, is their capacity and willingness to set aside ego, their own personal interests, and work together for a greater interest and a greater mission. And that's what we have to get back to. The problem is the design of our government is built from the ground up to prevent that. The design of our media is built from the ground up to say such things are impossible. The design of social media algorithmically works against us in this respect. And our culture has devolved to one of cynicism and pessimism and hero destruction. We're not allowed to believe in the greatness of people anymore. We're only allowed to focus on people's flaws. If you look for a flaw, no matter how magnificent the painting, how incredible the architecture, how great the builder, you will find it. If you look for the good side in things, no matter how flawed the structure is, you'll find that too. And you have to make a decision in life. Are you looking for good or are you looking for bad? Because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's build a system together where we look for the good in each other and focus on that and collaborate with each other. And let's do it like we did crypto. Let's stop hoping a centralized government, a single person at the top, is somehow going to solve all of our problems and ails. Let's now do it in a decentralized way. We got 50 states, 50 campaigns, 50 groups of people, thousands of constitutional workshops, thousands of institutions to unite, to come together and talk about how we fix this. And you know what? We'll do it. And if we push just as hard as we push with crypto, we'll wake up in a few years and there'll be millions of people there in the boat with us, disgusted with the current system, waiting for a brand new one. I honestly believe we can get there. And I honestly believe we're going to win. So thanks for listening. I endorse no one except for you, the American people. Cheers.